Networking comes down to one basic human desire, and that one human desire is trust. Trust is the thing we all want when we network. Trust is also the foundation of all networking. It's the foundation of all of our relationships. And since networking is about developing professional relationships, and relationships are all about trust, trust is the thing that we want from other people. We want them to trust us and we want to trust them. And it's also the how you network. So it's both the why you network and it's also the what and the how, I would say. Networking is what? About what? Trust. How do you do it? You develop trust. So anything you do in networking that creates trust is going to make you successful. Anything you do that's not going to create trust is going to make your networking unsuccessful and frustrating. If you think about it from that standpoint, when you think about networking in a room full of people who you've just met, of course, you don't trust any of those people. You don't even know those people. And you might have a conversation with some of them throughout the event, and you might talk to them and share some things about yourself. But in that moment, you are still, whether you know it or not, putting up your guard around new people and strangers. And so everything they say, you're kind of filtering through your own lens to figure out, do I trust this person? Do I not trust this person? Do I believe what this person's saying? That's why most people don't like to go to those events. That's why most of the time you go to those events and you don't feel like you really made any connections. You just are in a situation where it's hard to trust people. On the other hand, if you sit down with somebody who you've either just met or who you worked with in the past and maybe you reconnected with and you have a conversation, you already maybe trust that person if you worked with them before. But even if you haven't, if you're sitting there one-on-one and you're having a conversation and you're trading information, you're exchanging value of information or value of recommendations or advice, things like that, those are actions that make you trust somebody. And especially when somebody gives you something, not only do you want to give back because of reciprocity, but you start to trust them because they've given you something first without really making you give them something. That's why trust is the major human emotion, need, foundational desire in networking. Think about yourself in your job. So let's pretend for a second you're not really looking for a new job, but you work in a company, you work in an organization. If you trust the people you work with, are you more likely to get along with them at work? If you trust the people you work with, if you trust your manager, if you trust your leaders, are you more likely to enjoy going to work than if, say, you didn't trust them? If you were more likely to go to work, you're more likely to work there longer. You're more likely to probably advance your career there. And so from your company or organization point of view, building trust in the organization is a huge way to keep people at the company. Turnover, people leaving, having to hire new people is extremely costly for companies. And in my experience being in HR for the last 15 years, in some form or fashion, I've always worked around the projects of retaining people. My very first job, my title for my first HR job was Director of Retention, specifically to figure out how to keep people at an organization. We did all kinds of research and analytics and things like that. And as I moved through my career, I worked in different parts of HR, and the last part was in compensation, right? So compensation is an easy way for companies to say, well, that's what we have to do to keep people. But I'm going to tell you, as a person who worked in compensation for many, many years and saw many, many efforts to retain people through paying them more, that is not why people stay. That is not why people leave. People stay at an organization when they trust the organization, when they trust the people in that organization, right? Organizations are just made up of people. So when they trust the other people, they're more likely to stay. because it's predictable, it's safe, it's an environment where they know they can show up and do work and do really good work or screw up, but they still trust that it's not going to be a terrible environment where they can take those mistakes and then they can learn from them and they can grow. When you have an organization with high trust like that, not only will people stay, but they'll collaborate more across the organization. They will start to seek out people to have conversations with, and they'll think who else should be involved here, and they'll go find those people. Now, part of that happens when they already have relationships with those people. So if you think about this is kind of the topic of internal networking or networking within the organization. If you know the person in the other department you need to work with already and you trust them, this is going to be a very easy project to work on together, because you're not going to have your defenses up. You're not going to worry about, are they judging me? Are they going to stab me in the back? You're thinking, okay, we can work together and get this project done. If you don't trust them, you're going to be doing all those things. It's going to be very difficult. So companies that foster that ability to grow trust between people and actually almost train people on how to develop professional relationships are going to become higher trust companies that will get better productivity out of their employees, will get better retention. People will stick around. People will feel more connected to the company. And a lot of times this question of how do you grow trust comes up and people think, well, that's nice that you say that, Greg, but how does a company actually get its employees to trust them? And what I've seen, what I've found is anything that's written or electronic is subject to skepticism. And the reason why is because, and this is not a knock on anybody who does this, because I have several friends who do this and they're very talented. Companies communicate messages to their employees that are very, I'll say, safe. They say, basically they toe the company line, right? I mean, it's whatever in the best interest of the employees and the companies, and people are paid and have careers in developing messages that we're going to connect with people, but they're going to be padded. I'll say they're going to have sort of a sanitized version of what's going on. Actually, like most companies aren't going to send out memos that talk about the bad news going on. Or they're not going to take on tough topics in those communications, and those are your written communications. Those are your things you see in emails, you see in print, that kind of stuff. So it's sort of public relations, right? And again, public relations is designed to convey the right messages to the public so that you don't have controversy and conflict. Again, there's nothing wrong with that. But as an employee, you read that and you go, okay, whatever, that's the company version of this. Also, companies that so the question was, how do you get back to developing trust within a company? You have to have people in the org that are talking to each other, meeting people outside their immediate team. Of course, your team needs to talk and get to know each other because they need to share information about themselves. They need to, whether you call it be authentic or be vulnerable or whatever that is, people need to open up and be able to have open conversation and communication with each other. And that makes a lot of sense within the team. However, higher trust organizations are going to be ones where employees cross into other functions, into other parts of the company, and have conversations and relationships with those people, because your jobs always intersect. And again, if you develop those relationships, it's going to make your job so much easier. How does a company, again, teach people to do this, right? Because again, I'm saying you have to develop trust and knowing how to develop trust are two very different things. We know, like, I trust this person, I don't trust this person, but why? Well, you've probably sat down and talked to them. You've had more than one conversation with them. You've talked about yourself. You've talked about them. You both have shared. You have a common understanding about who the other person is. And when you get to that level, it makes hard conversations much easier because you already have established that baseline of the relationship. However, I think many companies don't foster that, and they actually don't talk about it or even train anybody or direct anybody on that. It's just expected that people know, oh, I'm going to go have to find this person and develop this relationship. And I think a lot of companies take that for granted, especially in the last 5 years where people kind of went home to work, a lot of people in remote roles. And there were many people who were coming into the workforce in the last 5 years, right out of college or from other careers. They went into the workplace and there was no opportunity for them to talk to other people face to face. It was all on Zoom. It was all by email or Slack or Teams or whatever you use. And so a lot of those sort of exercises where people got to sit down and talk to each other and get to know each other didn't happen. So a lot of those trust establishing conversations that happen when you're meeting in person or being in an office were not there. You don't typically call somebody up on a Teams or at the beginning of a Teams meeting and just kind of, I'll say it, shoot the shit. You don't typically do that and you do that when you're sitting down in person. Now, this is definitely not me saying everybody needs to go to the office, because as somebody who's worked from home for almost the last 5 years, I'm not saying we want to do that. But what I'm saying is the reality is that we have lost those informal trust building conversations within organizations because of some of the hybrid work. And again, it's got all of its benefits, but this is one of those downsides. And the solution, I'm not saying is everybody get back in the office. The solution is that you teach people how to establish these trust building conversations within your organization and teach people and encourage them to seek them out. Even if they may never really work with some other people in other departments because of what they do, it's still good to get exposure to what's going on in the rest of the company. It teaches you more about the company. It teaches you about what they're struggling with. It gives you the opportunity to weigh in and give suggestions. It gives them the opportunity to help you. It gives all these opportunities for companies to work better, faster, more efficient, make them more profitable. And at the same time, all those connections with those employees makes those employees want to stay there and keep working there. It feels like their tribe, I'll say, so to speak. And I don't know if I'm supposed to say that or not. It feels like their circle of people. It feels like their community of people. It feels bigger than just their team and their boss. And it gives them more connection to that company. So again, back to the idea of not only do your business results get better when you have these conversations, but your retention improves, which drives down your cost of replacement. It drives out inefficiency and loss of productivity from people being gone. It drives down the burnout from the other people who have to fill in when somebody leaves. There's complete upsides. There's no downside to getting the people in your organization to learn or to train them to have these trust building conversations. So you could call it internal networking. That's what I call it. It is all the things about networking, but it all comes down to trust. That's what I think most companies are missing. They've been missing it since we all went home, and now we're coming back. And I think coming back in the office, they're going to have to do it even more because people have been working online and now they're bringing people back into the office. And it's like we've kind of forgotten the etiquette of having these conversations in person. So I think there's a lot of companies that, may need some help figuring out how to navigate that as they bring people in. Plus the fact that people coming in to the office, if you're an Amazon employee and you just got told you all got to come in the office, people are pissed off about that. They definitely don't trust their organization. So how does an organization like Amazon go establish trust? They're going to have to get really good at having conversations with their employees and not just the electronic, the written stuff that they send out to try to communicate, but the actual leaders and managers having those in-person conversations and starting to get to a point where people can trust each other again. I know that was mostly mindset and strategy and high level, but what I would say is all the things I talk about in my newsletter and in this podcast and in this video, they all apply internally at a company as well. So connecting with people that you already know or getting introduced to people from people you already know, that should be pretty easy within an organization where you work. sitting down and having real conversations with them face to face, even if it's on the phone or Zoom, but not like a work conversation, but that conversation that's about who are you, and tell me about what's going on. What are you working on? What are you struggling with? What could you use help on? And then trying to help those people out. I'm not saying take on their jobs for them, but giving them an idea or connect them with somebody else who could really make their job easier. And then, when they say, how can I help you? Make it really easy for them to help you, and just do this. You have to do this all the time. Like, this can't be you go to a corporate training event and, I come in there and I tell you all these things and you go, that's great. Here's my process. I'm going to go out this week and do it. You have to do this ongoing. This has to become a part of who you are in the company. But I can tell you, it's valuable for your company and it's valuable for you. If you do these things in your company, you are going to find all the internal opportunities. You are going to find all the people who can help make your job easier. And you're going to become one of the people that everybody thinks of as sort of the hub in the middle of the wheel with all these spokes going out to these different parts of the company. That's who you're going to become. So this works, again, inside a company. I mean, this obviously works outside of a company, but there's no reason not to do it. And it all comes down to the thing we all want and we crave in our lives, and that is trust. We want to be trusted, and we want to trust the people around us. That's it for this episode. I hope that helped you think a little bit differently about networking. Hey, if you work for a company and this sounds awesome to you, or you're like, my company needs that, reach out to me. I'd be happy to talk to you. It's kind of something I'm trying to focus on now, is how do I help organizations get better at this? But otherwise, leave me a comment, send me a message. If you're struggling with anything else in networking, let me know. That's what I'm here for. Have a great week. Go out, meet some interesting people. Remember, always be connecting.